So while we wait for the last game of this weekend's action around MLS between the Montreal Impact versus the Philadelphia Union, which will kick off a little bit later tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific, I am going to look at the last 6 games of the Saturday night action as part of the second part of this review. And once the Montreal versus Philly game is going to be finished, I, of course, will look at that game individually. And that this review, yes, it does include talking about that tragic event that happened last night, and that I almost saw something that one of my club did just a week ago, and it was a historical bad thing that they did a week ago. Now, first of all, let us talk about the first game, which is the Columbus Crew versus Nashville SC. And despite the fact that I thought that this one might be a game where Nashville could once again pull off a little bit of a surprise, it wasn't meant to be, as the Columbus Crew in this game were able to win 2-0, and it's clear that this is a game, it shows, where quality seems to kind of overshine in terms of a team that has less quality in terms of their squad. Now, in the first half, there wasn't really much to report early, and in fact, I actually didn't watch this game at all, and I had to watch kind of the condensed version, and even in the condensed version, I think it wasn't until the 3rd minute mark when they actually show real highlights of things that actually happened, and that this was kind of a bit of a snooze fest for the first 25 minutes of this game. The first chance did came in the 27th minute when Annabelle Godoy almost gave Nashville a 1-0 lead, but Mensah was able to clear the shot off the line. But other than that, it was pretty much the only action we had in first half as we head into the second half with no score between both of these teams. Now in the second half, we eventually would get the opening goal, and it would be the Columbus Crew that gets the opening goal as Pedro Santos scores from Jerzy Zardes to give the Crew a 1-0 lead. Room then denied Alex Mule a chance to give Nashville the equalizer from close range, although that was relatively an easy save that Room was able to make. Then Nashville was looking to try to push forward for the equalizer as Columbus was kind of started to sit back and trying to hold on to this 1-0 lead at home. Rome then had to make another comfortable save on Zimmerman to keep this one at 1-0 before they pretty much put all doubt of them dropping points at home as Jerzy Zardes would score a cheeky backheel goal from Artur and Zalarian. And I wrote goal of the week with the question mark, but we pretty much know who's going to win goal of the week from this weekend's action. I mean, it has to be the Medunian Olympic goal that I think is potentially going to win the goal of the week. But this is a good shout in terms of the fact that it's not easy you see a player to able to score a cheeky kind of backheel goal, and when you have the confidence like what Jerzy Zardes has been having this season by scoring so many goals and being red hot this season, that is kind of something that he just makes it look so easily. And that, as I said, that goal pretty much seals the win for the Columbus Crew as they get another big 3 points at home against the expansion team Nashville SC. Shots in this game, 8 shots compared to 15 that Nashville has. Both teams had 2 shots on goal, 4 shots off target compared to 8 that Nashville has, 2 shots that was blocked compared to 5 that Nashville has. And Nashville actually had 58% possession compared to 42% possession that Columbus had. And I believe this is the first time that Nashville actually had more possession at the end of the game than their opposition, as usually they're the team that doesn't have as much of the possession in the stat chart. But you know, for Nashville, this, as much as it is a tough loss against Columbus, you know, there's really no shame of losing to a team that is currently at the top of the Eastern Conference and leading the Supporter Shield race, and that it was always going to be tough to try to continue that momentum that they did against Atlanta. And even though, yes, they did have the best attacking performance against Atlanta by scoring 4 goals, yeah, this was going to be tough to try to replicate that against a Columbus defense that is 10 times better than what the Atlanta defense that Nashville faced last week. But the good news for Nashville is that the very next game when they play DC United at home, that looked like could potentially be a winnable game, and that could have a good chance to bounce back after this kind of minor setback against the best team in the league on the road. But yeah, moving on in terms of the next match is Orlando versus the Chicago Fire. Now, despite the fact that this was a 4-1 win for Orlando City, if you watch this game, it definitely did not feel like Orlando City absolutely dominated the Chicago Fire and got a 4-1 comfortable victory. And in fact, there was a lot of controversial call that happened in this game. Now, in the first half, 4 minutes into this game, Beric would be denied by the post, and the bad luck that the Chicago Fire had in that moment was something to come later in this game, because 7 minutes later, it would be Chris Mueller that was able to score the opening goal. And where the Chicago Fire was getting bad luck in this game, it seemed like Orlando City were the one that was getting the good fortune, because Mueller, when he hits this shot, it wasn't really a shot that looked like it was going to end up into the back of the net. It looks like it was just going to be a comfortable save from the goalkeeper, but because it took a wicked deflection that somehow it rose into the back of the net, Orlando City was able to take a 1-0 lead at that point. Now, the Chicago Fire had a chance 8 minutes later to tie the game up, but it was Aliceda's turn to be denied by the post, and I think Gillespie is probably the most relief man out of this sequence, because he originally spilled a effort that allowed Aliceda to potentially hit it into the back of the net, and instead of him doing that from 3 yards out, he basically hits the post. And that, again, this is just going to be signs of things to come with the Chicago Fire team, where they just got ultimately getting bad luck over and over again in this one. And the bad luck continued 4 minutes later when Nani would score from Mueller and Pereira to give Orlando City a 2-0 lead. And then Chicago looked like they got one back when Calvo was able to score, but VAR basically disallowed that goal. And despite the fact that, as I mentioned, there was a lot of controversial call during this game, this wasn't one of them. It was pretty clear that this was an offside, and that this goal, of course, did not count. Now, in the 33rd minute, Chicago had another opportunity to get one back when Juan handballed it in the box, but Gillespie actually saved this penalty from Madron. And you know, when this penalty was about to take in, there was actually an argument between a couple of Chicago Fire players in terms of who exactly is going to take it. And you know, I just never understand why in the world do teams don't decide beforehand who it is exactly is the designated penalty kick taker, and that, you know, that kind of sequence, when I saw how those Fire players were fighting to try to take the penalties, something tells me this is not going to go well, is it? And indeed, it wasn't, when Madron, who eventually won the argument, but he, of course, was denied by Gillespie in the box. And I have a feeling at halftime, that Fire dressing room must be very hot. And there's probably a lot of players that were kind of arguing against each other in terms of that penalty kick duty, and how in the world they were find themselves 2-0 down, despite the fact that they had bunch of chances to at least score a goal in this game. Now, eventually they did score that goal in the 47th minute, and it was actually another penalty that was given to the Chicago Fire. Now, this one, I feel like it was a little bit soft, because I think when Mueller brought down Navarro in the box in that play, it didn't look like he made a lot of contact to that, but with how much bad luck that the Chicago Fire has up until that point, they, of course, will take it. And this time, there was no argument between each players in terms of who's going to take the penalty, and it was Beric, the one that was able to bury it to make it a 2-1 game up to that point. Then in the 65th minute, this is where the controversial moment happened. So originally, Calvo looked like he has equalized for the Chicago Fire, and that they then go to VAR to see potentially if there was a handball in the box. And not only the fact that there was handball in the box, but there were like a couple of players that actually handballed it. Pineda was one of those players that handballed this one in the box, but prior to him kind of handball it looked like DK also kind of handballed it prior to that moment. And you know, this was always going to be a difficult decision if you're a referee about, you know, since there's multiple players that handballs it, should you of course disallow this goal, or should you just kind of allow this goal whatsoever? And I just feel like, in my opinion, if I was in that situation, I would just go ahead and give the goal, because when you have two players that kind of handballed it, it's kind of canceled it out. And at the very minimum, since the DK handball happened before when Pineda handballs it, then that clearly should be a handball on DK, because he was the first one to handball and in effect the projector of the ball to unfortunately carry right into the hands of Pineda. So at the very minimum, I feel like that should have been a penalty and that goal shouldn't have been disallowed. But I'm pretty sure the Chicago Fire not only are angry about that call, but I'm kind of surprised there wasn't a lot of argument between the players, or even Raphael Wiki, who seems relatively calm after that moment. And if I was at that moment, I would be screaming at the fourth official in terms of some of the calls that gone against them in this game. Now, later in this game, and that controversial moment seems like it really took a lot out of the Chicago Fire, because Orlando City would end up dominating in the latter part of this game, and they would score a third goal from Junior Urso from Perea to make it 3-1 in favor of Orlando City, before Michel would put the cherry on the top from Nani to make it 4-1 in this game. But again, this never looked like it was a 4-1 game to begin with, and that in many ways Orlando City are kind of fortunate that the call kind of gone in favor of them. But if you're the Chicago Fire, I know a lot of Fire fans will feel like they got robbed in this game, but in some way I can also say that this kind of just summarized the Chicago Fire season. I mean, this season they have just had so many of these good moments to potentially score a goal, and yet somehow in some way they weren't able to take those good moments and able to score a clinical goal that could really turn the game differently. And that, in other words, I think the Chicago Fire throughout this season, even though they are considered one of the worst teams in the league, they had the potential to be a very decent team, and that if they were only able to take their opportunity whenever they get the moments to either get an equalizer or maybe take the lead in the game, they probably wouldn't be in this situation where because they're right now look like one of the worst team in the league. But in terms of the shots in this game, both teams had 19 shots in this game. 7 shots on goal compared to 3 that the Chicago Fire has. 6 shots off target compared to 11 that the Fire has. 6 shots that was blocked compared to 5 that the Chicago Fire has. 46% possession compared to 54% possession that the Chicago Fire had in this game. And, there's really not much I could say other than the fact that this is kind of just summarized the season for the Chicago Fire, and that for Orlando City, they got very fortunate in this one. But moving on, in terms of the next match, is Houston and Minnesota. Now, coming into this game, if you would have told me that if the Loons can get a draw out of this game, I would be very satisfied out of this, because I knew this was going to always be tough to face the Dynamo on the road, a place that the Loons have never got a resort in league play, and that consider we still have to deal with just numerous injury and once again deal with the hot and humid temperature in Houston, I thought a draw would be a good result. However, after how this game plays out, especially how the Loons blow a 2-0 lead and once again is going to have another player not available in the next game because of getting a red card, this doesn't feel like a good draw anymore, and it felt more and more like this was a huge missed opportunity, and it felt like a loss for Minnesota. Now, in the first half, and before I talk about this game, unsurprisingly, Adrian Heath decided to go with a very strong lineup in this game, and, it's understandable why he has to go with a strong lineup, because this team had a week worth of break, and that I just feel like there's no excuse for him to not put a strong lineup against a Dynamo team that we know we have to put a pretty good strong lineup if we're going to get any chance of getting points in this game. And the Loons actually got off to a great start and got the first goal 11 minutes in when Kevin Molino was able to score from Jan Gregush. But just a couple of minutes later, Houston would be able to get a penalty after Boxhall brought down Rodriguez. Originally, I feel like that was a little bit of a soft penalty, but the referee, of course, still giving it. And that Dane Sinclair, who, he started to look like a guy that has really nailed down the starting spot for this Loons Loon's goalkeeper position, as he made a huge save to deny Darwin Quintero from the spot. I mean, it wasn't really the best penalty from Quintero, but nevertheless, what a save this was from Dane Sinclair to keep this one at 1-0. And that, I thought that was also kind of a crucial moment at that point, because again, I thought Minnesota looked good to start out the game, and I think if that goal went in from Houston, that will really took the sail out of Minnesota, and the Dynamo was going to have it that way. But despite that, the Dynamo continued to look very threatened going forward on the attack, and I just felt like the defense was very shaky in the first half, and they were just getting stretched every time when the Dynamo trying to play on the flank, and that you can clearly see the speed of these Dynamo player has caused a lot of trouble in terms of this makeshift backline that Minnesota is playing for these past couple of games. Now, the Loons did eventually get another goal right on the stroke of halftime when Robin Lehrer were able to score to make it 2-0 in favor of Minnesota. And at that point, I was thinking, okay, we're up 2-0. All we need to do is shut this thing down in the second half, and we will have a huge 3 points and finally get our first win in Houston. Instead, the Dynamo would get on the board in the 58th minute when Darwin Quintero was able to do a very filthy chip over Sinclair head to make it 2-1 in favor of Minnesota. I mean, this was a one that I feel like you could say that Sinclair should have done better in terms of punching that one, but at the same time, he was kind of a little bit off balance, and it was just kind of unfortunate that it lands right into the feet of Darwin Quintero, who he just seems that he loved to score against his former team, and it seemed like every time when he faced against Minnesota, he has something to prove in terms of that. It was a huge mistake that the Loons decided to let him go last season. Now, Minnesota did have a chance to make it 3-1, but Mera made a full stretch save off of Molino to keep this one at 2-1, and that would be very big for the Dynamo, because just 4 minutes later, they would get the equalizer when Figueroa was able to tie this one up. Now, despite the fact that this was a good save from Dane Sinclair, he did kind of allow a juicy rebound right to Figueroa, but at the same time, I also had to ask the question, where on earth was the defense for the Loons? Like, Figueroa was just wide open in the box. There was just nobody around him, and I was just, not only I was fuming the fact that we conceded that goal, but I was asking question of why in the world did nobody decide to cover him, or better yet, it just felt like everybody just stopped once Dane Sinclair make that save, and I'm like, why did you decide to stop? Like, did you expect that one to just kind of pair it out and you just kind of stop playing? Either way, that was very frustrating to see the way that was the way that we, of course, allowed the equalizer, and I was getting nervous that this could be a game where we could not only blow a 2-0 lead to only get a point out of this game, but we might not get anything out of this game if the Dynamo continue to push forward. But instead, we also had two big chances to retake the lead. First, it was Reynoso had a chance to take the lead, but unfortunately his long-range effort just brushed the post. Then Molino had a chance to add his second goal of the game, but the post once again denies him. I mean, Molino in this game, he was kind of snake-bitten with the way that he could have easily had a hat-trick in this game, but then just 2 minutes later, he went down with an injury, and that is kind of the last thing that the Loons really needed, to see Molino once again went down with an injury, and that just adds in another list of long injury reserve list that the Loons have with some of their bigger starter in this team. And to add insult to injury, Gregorish would be sent off in the 89th minute, and originally I had no idea how he was sent off in this instant, but then a couple of minutes later they eventually show why he of course got sent off. And as much as I know there's going to be some Loons fan that said that this red card was harsh and it shouldn't have happened, and that, Gregorish, he did kind of swing his arm toward the opponent, and even though he didn't make any contact to it, when you decide to swing your arm like that at an opponent, whether you make contact or not, that is definitely a sign that you are trying to make contact with your hands to the face of the opponent, and that usually means it's an automatic red card. So, yeah, I was very disappointed in Jan Grealish up to that point. And again, this is now just another player that's not going to be available in that next game against Columbus, where we really need to have our strongest 11 in that game if we're going to have a chance to face against the best team in the league. But ultimately, that red card kind of came a little bit too late for the Dynamo, as they couldn't really quite take advantage of being a man up. And in the end, the shots in this one, 17 shots compared to 16 that Minnesota has, 10 shots on goal compared to 6 that Minnesota has, 4 shots off target compared to 8 that Minnesota has, 3 shots that was blocked compared to 2 that Minnesota has, and possession-wise, 60% possession compared to 40% possession that the Loons had in this game. And again, I just feel like this was a really disappointing draw, considering we blew a 2-0 lead, but now we have more players that is going to be missing action in the next game, whether it's due to injury or due to its stupidity kind of play that got themselves getting suspended into the next game. But yeah, moving on, in terms of the next match, is the Whitecaps. How about Vancouver getting back-to-back wins in this game against RSL? And that, in the first half of this game, I thought both teams was kind of a little bit sloppy in the first 30 minutes. But as I said before, in any Vancouver Whitecaps game, the more sloppy the game is and the more that neither team had a chance early in the game, the better that the Vancouver Whitecaps are going to do in the long term. Because one of the things that I always kind of worry about the Whitecaps is that they tends to make the game very kind of chaotic and allow the opposition to have bunch of chances. But it seemed like in the last couple of games they have stopped doing that and haven't really allowed their opponent to just kind of put shooting practice in front of Hassel's goal and hope that they can, of course, not concede more than a goal to maybe get a draw or get a lucky counterattack so that they can, of course, score a goal. Now, Hassel did have to kind of finally call to action in the 30th minute when he was able to stop the Karate Kid Krylak, and that was really the first real chance of the day. Then Adnan actually got a yellow card for a blatant dive, and yeah, something tells me that the disciplinary committee is going to give Adnan a phone call either on Monday or Tuesday and give him a hefty fine for that, because that was as blatant as it gets. And I just don't even understand why he even kind of argue with that, because you can clearly see that there was no way in the world that should have been a penalty, and that if you're going to try to sell to the referee that it should been a penalty and that you got brought down in the box, at least do it in a way that it isn't just as blatant as what we saw during that sequence. Now, in the second half, the Whitecaps would get the opening goal, and it would be Milinkovic that gets his first ever MLS career goal from Dahomey and Montreal to give the Whitecaps a 1-0 lead, and things got from bad to worse for RSL besides conceding that early goal in the second half when Kyle Beckerman, I just don't know what is going on with Kyle Beckerman, and whether or not, I know a couple of weeks ago, or I think a couple months ago, when he talked about how he's going to continue to play until his legs kind of fall off. Well, this season, it seemed like his leg clearly had fall off, and it seemed like his brain seems to kind of fall off too, because this was just silly from Beckerman. Decided to do a kick out on Hassel and get himself a second yellow card in the sequence, and that was just no need for Beckerman to do that. And especially when you're on a yellow card and you're such a veteran like that, this is something that you clearly should not do, and there's just no excuse in terms of him during that action. Now, despite the fact that RSL was down to 10 men, I thought they continued to look to be the team that potentially get the next goal, as Vancouver, even though they were a man up, they didn't play like they were a man up and was kind of just sitting back. Hassel then had to deny Ruiz from a long-range effort before Putna actually had to rob Montero to keep this one at 1-0 in the 76th minute, before RSL, after all the chances that they kind of got, despite the fact that they were down to 10 men, was finally paid off in the 81st minute when Justin Merrim was able to score from Michael Chan to tie the game up at 1 apiece. And I thought up to that point, it seemed like RSL is going to potentially get that second goal. And if you're Vancouver, it's kind of all hands on deck again, like they have always done whenever they're involved in a close game. But instead, it would be the Whitecaps that would retake the lead 3 minutes later when Lucas Cavallini was able to score from Montero and Bodissimo to give them a 2-1 advantage. Now, speaking of all hands on deck for the Whitecaps, that was pretty much the case ever since they scored that go-ahead goal and eventually the winning goal of this game, as RSL was putting everything at the kitchen sink. But thankfully, despite the fact that the Whitecaps had to endure that 9 minutes of grueling stoppage time, and that I'm pretty sure Whitecaps fans pretty much could barely breathe after the 9 minutes of stoppage time with the way that they were just holding on for dear life. They were able to get a 2-1 win in this game, and the shots in this one, 25 shots compared to 8 that the Whitecaps had, 4 shots on goal compared to 3 that the Whitecaps had, 13 shots off target compared to 2 that the Whitecaps had, 8 shots that was blocked compared to 3 that the Whitecaps had, and possession-wise, 63% possession compared to 37% possession that the Whitecaps had in this game. And despite the fact that RSL dominated every category in the stat sheet, they came out short-handed, or they came up short in this game. And that really, I feel like in these last couple of games, despite the fact that they got that big victory against LAFC, they have not looked very good during this phase 1 and now heading into phase 2 of this schedule. Like, that LAFC win that they got is their only win that they of course got, and despite the fact that they had some resilient resort against Seattle and Portland and able to score late goals, they have really struggled in this phase 1, and that in these last 2 games, it is pretty clear that they not only struggle in terms of the defensive end, but they also struggle now in terms of just nobody on their team that is able to score a goal for this one, and that they're going to have to figure out if they want to get themselves back into the picture of the playoffs. Moving on, in terms of the next match, is the Colorado Rapids getting a 2-0 road win against the Galaxy. And as much as this might have been a surprising result, given the fact that the Rapids just came off of a 4-1 loss against FC Dallas, and you would think that they would be the less confident team, and that the Galaxy, since they have more rest coming into this game, you would think they would easily win this one. Well, here's the thing about the Galaxy, and this is kind of weird about the Galaxy. Throughout these last couple of years, not only the fact that there's time where when they're playing at home, they just don't look like a team that look like they feel like they're playing at home, but they always tend to drop points or lose to teams that you clearly feel like they should have won in this. And Colorado is a good example of that. Like, they just, for these past 2 or 3 years, they just cannot solve the Rapids, whether they're on the road and at home. And in this game, it was the case again where the offense, in that game against the Quakes, I thought it was just kind of just one of those games where eventually, as hot as their attack was coming in, it was going to eventually slow down a little bit. But after the way that they got shut out in this game, maybe that Quakes game that they struggle in terms of going forward on the attack might have not just a blip, and that there might be some concern in terms of how this attack has looked in the last 2 games. Now, just like the RSL Vancouver game, there was really no real chance in the first 25 minutes, and that the real first chance came in the 25th minute when Efrain Alvarez was trying to put a shot from 20 yards out, but unfortunately that one hits wide. But unlike the RSL versus Vancouver game, we did eventually get the opening goal in the first half, and it came in the 39th minute when Cole Bassett, who has just been red hot in these last couple of games, scores from Sam Vines to give the Rapids a 1-0 lead. And that in the second half, the Galaxy did do a good job in terms of responding, despite the fact that they were coming into the second half down 1-0, and that they had some decent chances. One of them was Zubak, who I feel like he clearly should have scored in this instant, but that Yarbrough did make a very good save from close range to deny him and the Galaxy the equalizer. Now, on the other hand, the Rapids, despite the fact that they kind of started slow in the first 15 minutes of the second half, they kind of woke up a little bit, and that they had a big chance to make it 2-0 when Shinishiki somehow, in some way, aren't able to tap this one. And I mean, it was a good save from Bingham nevertheless, but he basically just hit it straight to Bingham from 5 yards out, and that's got to be one that pretty sure Shinyashiki would love to have back, and one that he feels like he clearly should have scored to make it 2-0 in favor of the Rapids. Then Jonathan Lewis hits the post just 1 minute later, and it looked like the Rapids was going to be snake bit again in terms of going for and score more than just the one goal that they had in this game. But then the game kind of turned in the 75th minute when Araujo would get his second yellow card and given his marching order, and from then on the Rapids were basically the better team with a man up. And unlike Vancouver, where they had a man up and they felt like they were the one that were down a man in that game instead of being a man up, the Colorado looked like they were the man up, and that the Galaxy were the team that was feeling like they were just down to 10 men. And eventually they did get that elusive second goal when Jonathan Lewis scored from Galvan and Acosta. And that originally this goal was disallowed for offside, but they take a look in the monitor and they of course overruled that decision, because on the attacking sequence of play, originally they said Galvan was in an offside position, which that was not the case. He was onside, and therefore that goal of course would stand, and that of course would be the final score of this game, as the Colorado Rapids get a 2-0 win against the Galaxy. And the shots in this game, 17 shots compared to the 11 that the Galaxy had. Both teams had 4 shots on goal, 4 shots off target compared to 7 that the Rapids had, 3 shots out of block compared to 6 that the Rapids had, and possession-wise, 55% possession compared to 45% possession that the Galaxy had in this game. And, you know, for the Galaxy, they, as I said, they better hope that this attacking kind of struggle that they've been enduring these last 2 games isn't really a sign of the fact that they're once again start to struggle in terms of scoring goals. But moving on, in terms of the last game that I'm going to talk about, at least on this board and until the end of that Montreal versus Union game, is the tragic event game. So, yeah. All I have to say about this game is that I might as well just copy and paste what I said in that 7-1 demolition against the Seattle Sounders, because it basically just kind of reflect again the same way in this one. And that the only other thing that I'll say about this game is that clearly we need to eventually start thinking about dropping a nuke in this organization, whether it's after this game or we're going to do it in the off season, because this is getting toward not just 2018 kind of level of suckerage from the Quakes, but just getting to a way that I just kind of started to lose hope in terms of actually rooting for this team. Now, in the first half, 20 minutes into this game, Chara actually dragged a shot that was wide off the post, and that was actually a warning of what would later to come, because Diego Chara was literally allowed to walk through the heart of this Quakes defense completely uncontested, and that this is not the first time I see this as happen. And this is also kind of one of the biggest weakness in terms of the man marking system, if not the biggest weakness, because as soon as if one of your defender lose a man, yeah, there is not going to be a situation where other players are just going to come and help out to try to clean up that mess, and instead the other player is just going to watch him go uncontested and hope that he either miss or somehow the goalkeeper able to make a big save. But fortunately this time Diego Chara just dragged the shot wide, and that just 2 minutes later the exact same thing happened. Paredes completely walked in the middle of the Quakes defense, uncontested whatsoever. This time Vega of course was able to rob him, but inevitably the first goal was going to come from the Portland Timbers, and it came in the 25th minute when Diego Valeri scored on the penalty. And this was a penalty because Shea Salinas handballed it in the box, and originally I thought it was kind of a harsh call to say that was a handball, because it didn't look like his arm kind of was outstretched. But really, I'm not even going to complain about that call compared to just such a disastrous performance that the Quakes defense once again put in this game against the Portland Timbers. Now, 2 minutes later, Ibobosi would make it 2-0 in favor of the Timbers, as he scored from Velifania to make it 2-0 at that point. Vega then had to rob Larea to potentially keep keep this one at least respectable heading into halftime. And, even so, I thought this was going to get ugly, and that this looked like something we're going to see similar to what happened in the Seattle game, where this Quakes defense just completely gave up, and Portland is just going to run up the score like what Seattle did in that game. Now, in the 42nd minute, the Quakes, believe it or not, had a chance to get the equalizer, but Ivicic, who, by the way, in this game, both teams actually made some big changes, and Ivicic actually got the start over Clark, which I guess maybe this is just Giovanni Savarese decision to kind of rotate goalkeepers, but I'm kind of surprised Jeff Antonella did not start in this game. And Timbers fans, if you know what happened to Antonella, let me know in the comments below, because it's kind of interesting to see Ivicic in goal in this for the Timbers, since he usually doesn't make a lot of appearance to them, but he did make a good triple save, first robbing Youngworth twice before robbing Lima on the follow-up shot. But the Quakes did eventually get one back, and it came in the last minute of the first half, when Fierro was able to score a golazo from Lopez and Calvillo. And up to that point I was thinking, well, we haven't played well, but at least we got a goal back, and that we got some momentum heading into the second half, and maybe we're going to Valeri would score from Jimmy Chara to make it 3-1 in favor of the Timbers in the 57th minute. Then Chara would score in the 70th minute, and that's Jimmy Chara that was able to score a goal after Vega did his trademark spilling a save and allow a juicy rebound to the opposition to score against them. Before, in the 85th minute, it would be 5-1 in favor of the Portland Timbers when Cascante was able to score from Valeri after some questionable set-piece defending from the Quakes. And Anis Gilda would make it 6-1 in favor of the Portland Timbers, and actually score a record-breaking goal at that point, as he, of course, were able to score from Diego Chara, and that would also be the goal with not only add the 6 for the Timbers, but now the most goal that the Timbers have ever scored in a single game. And I also kind of wrote Fisher out with 3 exclamation mark, and I even posted on Twitter as soon as this goal was as soon as this goal was put in. And I'm pretty sure a lot of Quakes fan was putting the hashtag Fisher out, because it's pretty clear the biggest problem with this team. The problem with this team isn't just because of the players that is not good enough, isn't because that Almeida regularly getting outclassed and he needs to really think about abandoning his man marking system, isn't always going to be about Jesse Fornelli making some questionable decision, even though sometimes he does that, and probably isn't about how some of these high-ranked officials kind of hired the wrong guy or getting the wrong players to try to sign. But the real reason of why we have got to this point where the Quakes are just look like a punching bag weeks after weeks is because of John Fisher, and the lack of investment and just the lack of care for this club is just the reason why this team is just being laughed at by every single team. And that I really hope when Don Gabbard actually saw this result, he might think about actually forcing Fisher to sell this team, because this is a disgraceful performance, not only for the Quakes, but in general in terms of this league performance too. Like, if some outsiders see this kind of result, they would just kind of laugh, not only about the Quakes, but also the quality of how the league has put, and that the Quakes are one of the prime example why this league is still being held back. And even though there have been some progression that this league has made for in the last couple of years, you still have the Quakes that feels like this is still 2010 or maybe 2005, and just still have this MLS 1.0 mindset that just does not work in this modern day of MLS. So yeah, I just, there's really not much to say other than Fisher out, and that I think, as I said earlier, I really can care less about this team unless there's a nuke that is dropped on this team, and that John Fisher has to sell this team. Because as long as if they're not going to sell this team, not only I'm gonna think and actually cancel my season ticket, but I'm not even going to care about this team. And it just gets to a point where I feel like the Quakes are just like other other 23 or other 25 MLS team around the league, which is I'm just going to see them kind of like a neutral team and a team that I don't really put my heart and soul in terms of actually supporting this team. And you can call me a fake fan or you want, and you can call me that I'm just being kind of soft, the fact that I'm kind of quitting on the team. But when you see this kind of resort, not just from this season, but this has been something that I've been suffering for the past 8 years ever since I started supporting this team back in 2013. This is just unacceptable. I mean, this will put any fans over the edge, and that I'm kind of surprised that a lot of these Quakes fans have been stuck through the thick and thin of this, because it is incredibly hard to support the team with how bad this has been in the last couple of years. And all I want to ask is that this team can not just I don't expect this team to be an MLS contention team, but at least be kind of a mediocre team and a team that actually put an effort in games instead of doing what they have been doing for the past couple of weeks and also for the past couple of years. Is that too much to ask about this team? Anyway, shots in this game, 11 shots compared to 18 that the Timbers had, 4 shots on goal compared to 9 that the Timbers had, 6 shots off target compared to 2 that the Timbers had, 1 shot that was blocked compared to 7 that the Timbers had, and possession-wise, 61% possession compared to 39% possession that the Timbers had in this game. But either way, I am now going to kind of end the video right here, but when the Montreal versus Philly game is going to finish, I am going to come back to do the recording of the last game to review from this weekend's action. And last, but certainly not least, is this game between the Montreal Impact versus the Philadelphia Union, which just finished a couple of minutes ago. And even though at the end of the day, this game was a pretty lopsided game and that the Union, with a big 4-1 victory against the Impact actually got off to a great start, and they actually got the opening goal in the 5th minute when Kyoto was able to hit a lovely free kick into the back of the net. And despite the fact that it was a lovely free kick, there's got to be a lot of question in terms of the wall that the Union set up. And you can see after when that ball went into the back of the net, Andre Blake was just screaming at his wall there because of how they allow a gap right through the right side, which Kyoto was able to find it, and he basically just hit the free kick, splits through the wall and into the back of the net. And just like that, the Impact have a 1-0 lead. But unfortunately for Romel Kyoto, he basically went from a classic hero to zero in this game, and he did it in a span of 5 minutes. Because in the 10th minute, he would be given his marching order after he basically put hands to the face of Mark McKenzie, and that is a textbook red card. Like, you cannot put your hand at the face of your opponent, especially how Kyoto looked like he did it intentionally. And Montreal was down a man up until that point, and I thought at that point, yeah, this is not going to look well for the Impact, and I feel like the Union is going to be smelling blood after this sending off. And they almost got the equalizer straight away in the 18th minute when Shibilko fluffed his shot from 5 yards out. I thought Shibilko, even though he had 2 goals in this game, he could have easily scored a hat trick if he were able to put away some of his chances. But eventually the Union would get the equalizer, and it came from the captain Alejandro Bedoya from Wootton and Real. Now, originally, there was definitely a long wait to see whether or not if Wootton was in an offside position, and I looked at it a couple of times and it didn't look like Wootton was in an offside position. Or actually, I'm sorry, that's not what were they looking at. That was one of the goals that they were actually looking at later on, but this was actually an instant where it looked like Wootton might have actually handballed it, and it definitely didn't look like it was a handball with the way that ball hit him in the 5, but I just don't understand why in the world they were taking such a long time to look at it. But thankfully, at least they kind of got it right, and that the Union was able to get an equalizer right at that point. Now, Blake might have got away with a red card just 7 minutes later after it looks like he brought down Louis Blink, who was through on goal. And that, this was kind of something similar to what I saw this morning in the Chelsea versus Liverpool game, where Chelsea, of course, went down to 10 men. I think it was Christensen basically brought down Mane near the edge of the box, and Christensen, of course, was giving his marching order, and that this kind of looks something similar, except this time it was the goalkeeper that brought the attacker down, and that, yeah, Andre Blake is going to be very lucky, the fact that he got away with a denial of goal score opportunity, and that this could have easily been a 10v10 at that point. Now, right on the stroke of halftime, Shibilko finally gets his goal after, again, he had a couple of big chances that he missed before that, but he gets his goal and able to score from close range from Real and Montero. And heading into halftime at 2-1, you knew that not only the Impact was frustrated the fact that they can see the late goal in the first half, but this is going to get even more ugly in the second half. In fact, straight away, just 2 minutes into the game, Shibilko would bag his brace from Aronson and Real to make it 3-1 in favor of the Union. Diop would rob Fontana from close range, and I think the only reason why this one did not get as ugly as it would is because Diop did make some big save in this game, and if he didn't make some big save in this game, we could have had something similar to what happened last night with the Quakes losing 6-1 to the Portland Timbers at home. Now, the Union did kind of start to sit back a little bit and allow Montreal to have the ball between the 60th to the 65th minute mark, but at the same time they were still having some good chances, and they would make it 4-1 in the 65th minute when Anthony Fontana, who earlier was robbed by Diop, this time he wasn't going to be denied as he put a perfect shot from long range from McKenzie to make it 4-1 in favor of the Union. He almost scored again just 5 minutes later, but unfortunately Diop would deny him. Although, on the follow-up, Aronson had a chance to put away after Diop kind of allowed a little bit of a juicy rebound to Aronson. And, you know, Aronson, we know that he is considered one of the highly rated talent youngster in this league, and that he's going to eventually get his big money move to Europe. But these are kind of the situation where, you know, when you're able to get the ball on the rebound and you have an empty net to shoot, these are kind of the situation you got to put in. I mean, these are going to be something that the scouts are going to look at, and that they're going to write something like this in the con category with the way that yeah, this is just something that maybe will devalue a little bit of the value that Aronson might have, but there's no doubt that he's still a very wonderful player. But sometimes I feel like maybe he needs to work on his finishing, and that is one of those moments he clearly should have put it into the back of the net. Now, Diop, of course, continued to try to keep this game respectable by robbing Montero from point-blank range. But despite that, the Union was long already got this done game, set and match, as they were able to win 4-1 in this game. Shots in this game pretty much completely favored the Union. 20 shots compared to 10 that Montreal has. 11 shots on goal compared to 3 that Montreal has. 5 shots off target compared to 4 that Montreal has. 4 shots that was blocked compared to 3 that Montreal has. And possession-wise, 58% possession compared to 42% possession. As Philly, with this win, able to keep track with Columbus in terms of battling for that top spot in the Eastern Conference. And for Montreal, you know, I'm not going to read a lot into this game, because for majority of this game, they, of course, went down to 10 men. And you could argue that they kind of had a call gone against them in the 28th minute. But having said that, yeah, this was definitely not a fun game if you're an Impact fan to watch. And at least the only good news is it's not as bad as what the Quakes suffered this season, and at least Montreal does have a decent goalkeeper where it could have prevented it, again, like what we saw yesterday between the Timbers and the Quakes, and how it could have easily been 6 or 7-1 in this game. But there you have it. That is pretty much it for the review of this weekend. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think of all 13 of these games. I'm going to be back tomorrow, or actually not tomorrow, but more on Tuesday, to do the preview for another 13 games action that's going to be happening in the middle of the week. But until then, hope you guys enjoy this video, and I will see you guys next time.